Your Excellency, Chairperson of SADC, Mr. Filipe Nyusi, President of the Republic of Mozambique, Your Excellency, Incoming Chair of SADC, and our host, Dr. Lazarus Chakwera, President of the Republic of Malawi, Your Excellencies, Heads of States and Government, Your Excellency, Dr. Stergomena Tax, Executive Secretary of SADC, Honorable Ministers, Honorable members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, it is a great pleasure and honor to be here at the 41st SADC Summit being held under the theme Bolstering Productive Capacities in the Face of COVID-19 Pandemic for Inclusive, Sustainable Economic and Industrial Transformation. I would like to thank His Excellency President Lazarus Chakwera and the government of Malawi for the splendid arrangements made to ensure the success of this meeting despite the difficult circumstances. I would also like to express my profound gratitude to my sister, Dr. Stergomena Tax, Executive Secretary of SADC, for according me a standing invitation to SADC Summit, an honor and a privilege I greatly cherish. Thank you. The theme of this summit speaks directly to what the SADC region must do to build forward better and stronger, to industrialize, not just in any way, but in a way that is sustainable and in a way that is inclusive. Before the crisis, SADC was already one of the most unequal regions in the world. Today, with the crisis, we see inequality deepening. As the Economic Commission for Africa, we have been working very closely with the SADC region to ensure that as we put together a plan for building forward better, this plan is more inclusive and more sustainable. COVID-19 dealt a severe blow, particularly to the Southern Africa region. We know that towards the end of July, we had about 3.2 million cases of COVID with almost 88,000 deaths. I want to take this opportunity to thank particularly, of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa for putting together the African Vaccines Acquisition Task Team, which helped, and I am privileged to be part of that task team under the leadership of the Special Envoy Strive Masiwiya, where we've been able to procure 400 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine, Johnson & Johnson, for the continent, and we hope we can do more. We know that the first way out of this crisis is through vaccinations. But not only do we need vaccinations, we also need to produce on the continent. The SADC region is demonstrating its capacity to do that by starting in South Africa with the production of vaccines in South Africa. This is, for us as a continent, I think a first demonstration that Africa working together, coming together, can effectively build forward better sustainably in the crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, this crisis will affect us in many ways and will take a long time for us to get out of it. Because it is the first crisis, it's the first recession Africa has suffered in 25 years, according to the IMF. The IMF also suggests that Africa, and particularly the developing world, will need about $345 billion to get out of this crisis, or just to meet, to be able to attain its levels of growth that it had before. This is a substantial amount of resources that are going to be required. Today we know that revenues have fallen because a lot of our businesses have stopped. We know that tourism has taken a huge hit. We know that our service sector is suffering. And so meetings like this really are meetings where we need to sit and start thinking, how do we come back better? 2 or 3 things have been positive during this crisis period. One of them has been the use of internet technology. We've gone from about 17% to 24% connectivity on the internet. Many more people have access to the internet, but many more is from 17 to 24. We still have a huge part of our populations that do not have access to the internet, which has further exacerbated the inequalities that I spoke about before. We hope that our leaders, our leaders gathered here today, will ensure that we can increase connectivity in the continent, particularly for women and girls. About 330 million young kids have been out of school because of the COVID crisis. If they had access to the internet, of course they would be able to continue their education. At the Economic Commission for Africa, one of the things that we have done is launch, in coordination with the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, a conversation on how we can actually begin to do pool procurement. And I must say, this is an idea that was taken out of the SADC region with, again, you leaders beginning to push for pool procurement in many areas of Africa's development, for diversification. The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement talks about building and strengthening supply chains. At the Economic Commission for Africa, we decided to bring together these two concepts of building supply chains across the continent, but also doing pool procurement to see how we can strengthen our health services, ensure that we produce more drugs on the continent, not just vaccines. Prior to the COVID-19 crisis, Africa was already importing over 90% of its health commodities, many things that we could produce on the continent: syringes, gloves, sterilizers, alcohol, of course, oxygen tanks. We now know on the continent that we can produce them from Senegal to Rwanda to Morocco. Of course, in the SADC region as well, a lot of that is taking place. How can we bring that together to ensure that we do this in a way that works not just for the big businesses, but also for small and medium enterprises? Because as we know, our recovery, our building forward better is going to and must include small and medium enterprises, must include women, must include those that have been left behind. Finally, climate change has been, and we're talking, of course, in the presence of His Excellency, President Philippe Nyusi. Africa today spends somewhere between 5 to 11% of its GDP reacting to climate events. The Economic Commission for Africa has been privileged working with the African Union, again, to launch the African Green Recovery Strategy. That Green Recovery Strategy has components on energy, of course, on managing our natural ecosystems, on using nature-based solutions, first to protect our environment, but also to produce jobs. Of course, in agriculture, where we have 70% of our rural populations, ensuring that we can do more productive, more efficient, and more accessible agriculture, which is more sustainable, is going to be an important component of a green strategy going forward. A green strategy going forward also includes tourism, but it includes tourism that is done differently. In the SADC region, we have done a couple of studies with the Oxford University that show that if, for example, South Africa were to embrace a build forward better green recovery strategy, they will be able to create 420% more jobs, 320% more value added in the manufacturing sector. So there is value in looking at how one builds forward better under a sustainable, more green economy. The Economic Commission for Africa continues to stand ready to work, of course, with the member states to see how we can continue to build on this strategy, to look for ways in which we can reduce the inequalities that we face across the continent, but in the SADC region in particular. And finally, that we are able to, with the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, restore growth, restore prosperity, and build a future that is shared and common across all of our countries. Thank you very much for listening.